A feast was held in the monastery that evening. Osrith, for once, was gifted a seat with the warriors. Meat was shared. The cows who had followed Findlake's body had been butchered. At the royal table, Mia called for words to be spoken for her husband, toasts to be made, ale to be poured. Domhnall looked so solemn, Osrith thought, as she imbibed a little ale. The princes had been taken from Osrith and were asleep in the monastery, the royal servants watching over them. Constantine, sitting next to Domhnall, also looked sore, bitter, and he was deep in conversation with Domhnall. They had something in common, Osrith guessed, as she discreetly excused herself and made her way to the stables. Both had lost their fathers, and both their fathers had been kings of ancient lands. Osrith had made part of her way across the stony courtyard of St. Patrick's Monastery, the evening still underscored by a streak of yellow, when voices drew her attention. She stooped behind a low wall, listening. "And I tell you once again, Don Chada, if you do not know where the Queen is, then neither do I." A shuffling of feet suggested someone was struggling against someone else. Osrith craned to listen. "You, treacherous insect. I know you work for my conniving father." More scuffling. "If you have lain one finger on her, she was not your mother." The antagonistic voice retorted. "Your mother was Gormflaith of the Allied. Flan turned her over for Ethne. And does Mia know? Does Domhnall? She's his sister, his true sister. Is he standing by and allowing it, to ingratiate himself with a future dynasty? Ethne is my own cousin, as Domhnall is. Mia educates my dear sister, Gormlaith. You don't think?" The voice stopped suddenly. In the darkness, Osrith could feel a flush on her cheeks. It was her foot that had rested on loose stones, her fault that they had scraped, alerting the two men talking in whispers that they were being overheard. She ran, kicking more stones as she went. Behind her, stones were kicked again. Through the monastery garden, now in seed and being cleared, over tools and beds. Osrith launched herself at there and scrambled up it, her arms feeling weaker than they usually did as she hung onto the wooden framework. "Damn the ale," she cursed herself, as she scrabbled higher. She got up a little higher, but her leg was wrenched down. She kicked out, her foot impacting on skin. Ahead, she was guessing as the owner growled in pain. She swung up, but her nails clawed at the wood, rather than grasp it. Osrith fell, landing in a heap on someone below. Hands grasped at her legs, her ankles, as she fought to escape. Another swift kick brought her out of reach and up into an apple tree. Osrith climbed high as the commotion below. "We have you now." A triumphant voice below bellowed, as feet crunched on the tree detritus below. "And it will soon be morning. I have a sword." Osrith closed her eyes. It was true. When she climbed down, everyone's eyes would be on her. Guilt swept over Osrith as she imagined laughing eyes, mocking eyes. Eyes which belonged to the Uineel and the monks and the children. Eyes belonging to Domhnall, to Constantine, narrowing in disappointment and shame. Osrith made a rustle in the tree canopy, and triumphant feet stopped pacing. She would come down, as best as she could. She would apologize in the morning. But she found she could not go down. Her feet could not find purchase, and her head swam. She climbed up, apples thudding to the ground as she went, over and over, making her way to the other side of the tree. But, Osrith found, there was no other side of the tree. No branches dipped down towards the ground. A strip of pale blue underscored the night sky. Should she call down? Osrith carried on, tired arms gripping branch after branch. As the morning drew on, and she grew ever wearier, it occurred to her how big the tree actually was. But, she was wrong. When, finally, she looked around, it was in astonishment. She was at the top of a tree canopy. But not the same tree as she had climbed, that had been the one on the other side of the wooden wall of the monastery. Osrith realized she had climbed between dozens of trees, into the wood they had passed on their way into St. Patrick's, the one which half surrounded it, so high it was in the landscape. With great care, Osrith extricated herself from the branches of the tree she was in, her body weight stretching at her tendons as she climbed. The door to the kitchen was pushed aside when she got to the north side of the monastery. An voice unintelligible to her shouted as they heard a noise. It was the irascible cook, who was almost indistinguishable from the one in the kitchen at Doia. He bustled her in, shouting something angrily at Osrith, which she couldn't make out, then thrust a bowlful of dirty root vegetables at her. Tired, though grateful, Osrith turned a knife onto them, making them, in no time, into chunks that became the servants' dinner. 88,888,888. They travelled to Kells, or Sinanas, as Tadg said it, as Domhnall told his warriors the next morning, and onwards they would be travelling to Tara. The royal family at first, in front, with the children in a carriage, Domhnall in front, with his stepmother, and ahead, Flansinna, with his son Don Chada, who had had a heated conversation 2 nights before with someone, and had chased Osrith up the tree. Osrith had to manage on a horse, which was as bumpy and uncomfortable as it had been when she had first tried it in the meadows surrounding Scone. It took all her concentration to balance, to keep up with the warriors. She glanced, every so often, over to Don Chada, wondering what he had meant, and who Ethan was, she, who was in some sort of danger. He had also called his own father conniving, yet he rode adjacent the king of the southern Uineel impassively, long, dark hair flowing out from his head, pale skin and grey eyes, a match for Domhnall and Constantine, strong gaze searching the road ahead. They want to proclaim the new High King of Irion, Finolai explained, as they packed up the horses. Flansinna seeks the position, as well as Muir's hand to seal the deal, and take Dara with both the southern and northern kingdoms. But it isn't that straightforward, others will contest, and the lords must vote. It is called a thing. Like a Witton, Osrith thought, as she strode to the rooms of Queen Muir, who would have her take charge of the boys again. She knew what a Witton was. Father Bicker had explained that the nobles in Wessex and Mercia agreed in their kings. But not in Northumbria. Uhtred's had held the fortress for many an age, right back to Ida, the first from across the sea to claim the headland overlooking the sea from the northern Britons, and had taken a Britannic wife. Osrith looked across to Finolai. She wanted to ask him about Domhnall. The prince looked worn, as if his spirit had been slowly draining over a long time. Maybe, though, if the conniving father of Don Chada, Flansinna, did become High King, he may offer Domhnall aid to retake his throne. An alliance of some kind must be being worked through, or why were they still in Iran now Findlech was gone? It took 2 days to get to Kells, once a new Uineel palace belonging to Comsil. Now, a monastery founded by his Ionan monks, it could not have been more different to St. Patrick's. Indeed, St. Comsil's monastery, as the royal family called it, was made of stone, and not wood, and the round tower which rose high from its centre could be seen for miles before the procession got to its sturdy walls and had once been a royal palace. As they got closer, the way was marked with Irish crosses, those type with a circle at the centre, uniting the heathen sun worship with that of the symbol of Christ Jesus, the Redeemer. It was between 2 such crosses that Osrith took Neil and Malcolm, as she looked over the land. Were they close to the sea? Osrith wondered. Were there heathen here who might welcome a warrior, albeit without a weapon, to protect them if they were travelling, say, over the sea, maybe boats to Cumbraland, or Wellies? Though she had found her way to King's Court in Dunnottar, and could easily fall in with Domhnall's warrior, Osrith reminded herself that despite this life, her main objective was to find her brother, for she knew her uncle Elfric would never give up looking for her, for she was of value to him, and it must have angered him greatly that she had defied him. Flexing her arrow-damaged hand, she approached the 2 boys who had again been put in her charge. Neil was playing with an ash tree branch, trying to defeat an oak tree a little beyond the round oratory where the monks slept, little Malcolm sitting by him, using his stick to make patterns in the leaf litter. A little illicit bread taken from the monastery's kitchens an hour before tempted the 2 royal princes to abandon their games and sit next to Osrith, who smiled at their eagerness where food was concerned, before taking them up to the rooms that the royal family were occupying. The rooms were wide and spacious, the stone walls covered in highly decorative hangings. They are as old as Comsil himself, Muir told her, as the boys ran to her. Osrith felt herself pink in the cheek as she realized how lost in the thread detail she had become. The queen was a sight to behold. No longer in black, she wore a blue dress, her dark hair flowed long over her shoulders. Her eyes were bright, she had done her mourning and now, like a flower opening up its petals to the warmth of the morning sun, her face was alive with girlish hopefulness. She might be the older sister of Gormalath, maybe no more than 20 years old. She explained to Osrith that there would be a declaration of her marriage to Flansinna, and that the southern Uineal had met and accompanied him and his son down to Tara, where they would meet them for the wedding. "Is it by the sea?" Osrith asked. For by the sea meant heathens collecting its fruits. "Yes," Muir nodded. "And I wish you to be in charge of the boys," the beautiful queen continued, taking Osrith's hands, as lightly as a girl in her first days of courting might. "And, you will wear a dress, as befitting your sex. I know you are my nephew's warrior, but I must put my household to rights. After the wedding the Uineal will hold our festival, and one such as that has not been held for many a year." "Festival?" "A parley, a meeting of all the Uineal families, and our allies." Muir sighed and straightened out the material on her bodice, before crossing over to her son, Neil, and taking him in her arms. Malcolm looked up, wide-eyed, and the queen put down a hand to him. "We have been at war with the Norse for so many years that the annual festival has been suspended. It is held every 7 years, or, at least, it was. New laws and duties are ordained and councils are formed. Anyone who has been convicted of breaking laws is formally banished. Sometimes, the High King chooses to be lenient. Should there be the need for a new High King, he is elected." Muir sighed, remembering. "The last time it was held was when my father brought me over the sea to be married to Dfindlaich. The Norse have been subdued and have settled. We are at peace now, so we can meet as we always did." "It does not mean it will stay peaceful," Osrith thought to herself, grimly. Northumberland, Lindisfarne, Pitland. They all fought the same, and the Norse and Danes returned, and it got worse. Instead, she nodded in agreement. "I am sure your future husband has a plan to keep the peace," Osrith added. Muir's carefree look vanished from her pale blue eyes, and she narrowed them towards Osrith. "You understand well," she said. "My father discussed this with my brother, and with me. To gain peace it must be belied with strength and might," that was what he said. It wasn't necessarily a lie, if father meant Bicca, who had indeed voiced her father's words. "Yet, your father lost his life as a pilgrim on his way to Iona." Osrith lowered her head. "Indeed, lady," she replied. Muir put her hand softly under Osrith's chin and raised her head gently. "Look," Muir said, stepping towards a low table. "Here is what your effort has brought us." She leafed over the pages and showed Osrith the leather-bound pages of the half-completed manuscript that Domhnall brought from Iona. The pages were brilliant, in gold and red, richly illuminated with the 4 apostles' names in the Irish script, framed with the Gaelish swirls of the Sra, unending chains, animals and ancient symbol of the Lord, a right hand of God, stained with iron oxide pigment. It was as if Osrith was looking into heaven itself, made clear to man in parchment and pigment. "Glorious, is it not?" Muir said, placing the book open on that page. "The monks here will continue with it, and will make it into a much larger book and use it for their rituals and to preach to the heathens. And I cannot let your efforts go unrewarded. Now, I have a role for you. I know Constantine will not be without you, but you can continue being his companion no matter what you wear. I have spoken to Domhnall, and he agrees for you to continue to care for the 2 boys. And the girls." Osrith thought of the 3 princesses who would lead the way each morning from the castle to the monastery, silent, obedient, perfect in their studies. Ira, the beautiful, young golden-fair girl who was never parted from the nervy, ever-watchful Gormalath, Don Chada's sister. The black-haired, big-eyed Mary was the one in charge, though, or thought she was. "They are in my care, oh, Mary." The girl had walked into Muir's rooms. Neil and Malcolm rushed to her. but the girl held aloft the fabric she was holding to prevent it from being creased. She held it out to Muir. Osrith had never seen anything like it before, cream linen with a silk bodice, beautiful pearls embroidered at the front, with ribbons at the sleeves and waist. "Do you like it?" "I like it," Osrith nodded, looking at the way the light bounced off the silk. "But I am the daughter of an artisan, I cannot accept this." "Nonsense." Muir rebuffed her, looking about her head. "Your golden hair down, comb down to show your maidenness, and you will be glorious on my wedding day. So, shall I leave you with Mary's help?" "Help? My child, it is a dress I wish you to wear, as Constantine's companion and the prince's assistant. She is more than able to help you make the nest of a poor artisan's daughter." Muir gave one final glance over her shoulder, one of approval, then took the boys by their hands, pacing towards the rear door, through which Mary had come. Osrith's head shot back to the dress, and then to Muir. "You wish me to wear it?" She looked over the dress again, ashamed that her first thoughts were of disappointment that she would not be able to keep the company she liked, nor ride, or fight. "Yes, indeed," Muir nodded, as she continued in her onward momentum, boys still in hand. "Mary, show Osrith how it goes on." But Muir was not listening, and, within seconds, she had whisked herself out of her chambers. Osrith looked at Mary, who was looking back, scathingly. "Aunt Muir said to bring this," Mary sniffed, haughtily, "although, if you ask me, it is a waste." "And dearer," the girl broke off, as if she had said too much. "No one asked you," retorted Osrith, as Mary's face pinked. "Pass me the wasted dress and leave." A look of indignation passed over Mary's face, which solidified to imperiousness. She turned on her heel then, over her shoulder, shot back. "You ought to know, my Aunt Muir did not approve of you feeding the children on our progress. Only a savage, ignorant Saxon would behave with such poor manners." And, maybe because she knew Osrith was capable of physical response, Mary skipped off back towards the door, haste in her steps as her thick, black hair swung about her shoulders. 88,888,888. A horse this time carried Osrith south with the royal party. Green landscape surrounded them as they followed the royal party, low, undulating ground, softer rises and falls than those around Doyle. Saint Comsil was born here, in the myth Tadg was telling Domhnall's warriors. Some say, even at Team Hare. "But, what is it?" asked Fergus. "Ah, well, you see now," Tadg replied. "You have done, do you not? For when Lord Domhnall becomes king of the Gales." And Scon, Finolai chipped in, drawing his horse slower, to talk as the road curved leisurely around another gently rising hill. "Scon is from where the Picts have long took their kingship. Domhnall will have to take both." "You'd know about Domhnall taking things," Fergus chipped in, impertinently. Osrith shot him a glance, just as Finolai launched an apple pip at him. "How will we know Team Hare?" she asked, changing the subject. "What does it look like?" "It's a knock," Tadg replied. "I have only ever seen it once, but it rises above the ground in all directions. There are 5 roads leading from it." "And to it?" Fergus laughed, to which Tadg replied, "Of course. We have followed the way from Doyle itself, through Omar, and Kells. Our way is no accident." Osrith found herself looking over her shoulder. Whoever had built these roads, then, knew about the geography of Irian. To her, the green rolling hills all looked the same to her. "I have been to only one ceremony that was to find Leitch's wedding to Muir in Jansenid, the same lady who will be wed tomorrow. There is a long, narrow road with oak planks on it, which we must all take to follow her. There are hostages taken and placed on the hill." "Hostages?" asked Finolai. "Merely ceremonial, nowadays. To ensure no one backs out of the wedding contract. And to prevent interruptions of the synod as they decide the next High King. Laws are passed, prisoners are executed, or pardoned." He clicked his horse a little faster to keep up with the rest of the warriors. Osrith did the same, clenching the reins as her mare picked up speed. "We will eat at the Teach Myod Chuata." Banqueting hall? Translated Fergus, interested. The food will be good? Don't get big ideas, little man, Tad laughed. It is a big area next to the Leafel. We ate the last time, but the best food goes to our allies, to keep them our allies. Treachery, declared Finolai. It has not been held for many years now, though, Tad continued. The Norse have occupied our warriors. And, of course, if Flansinner wants to become High King, he will have to marry Maeve, as well as Muir, at the Leafel, the Stone of Destiny. It howls 3 times when the correct king has been elected. Maeve? Frowned Fergus. The goddess of the land, Finolai scoffed, rolling his eyes. Another pagan ritual that Christians still follow, and a howling stone. Dad turned on him, rounding his horse in front of Finolai. So, the footprint at Dunad was planted by Christ Jesus himself, was it? And you ignore the power of the Sihat Samhain? Tadg's pale face reddened as shot hot words to the Gaelish warrior. I was here last time. I heard it. Must you argue? Fergus complained, butting his horse between Tadg's and Finolai's. The 2 warriors backed away from Finolai, then took up the path again, wordless, but annoyed. There was silence for a while, as the royal party rounded another soft curved hill. Osrith was behind again, and keeping up with their warriors was beginning to be an effort. So, she was surprised when Constantine and Domhnall flanked her. She smiled at them, grateful for a change of company from the squabbling warriors. It's been a long day, and tempers are difficult to keep, Domhnall nodded towards his warriors. Within the hour we will be there. He smacked his horse's reins and brought the animal to a canter, easily catching up with Finolai, Fergus, and Dag. You have ridden well, Osrith, Constantine remarked. And we are nearly there. We will camp and we will eat well. In the banqueting hall? Osrith asked. Constantine narrowed his eyes towards her. You know it? Of it. Dag told us. He has been there before. Then, a thought occurred to her, and she frowned back to the prince. Dag spoke of hostages held at a hill. Constantine, what do you know of it? At her serious face, the boy laughed. It holds people to guarantee loyalty to the next High King. But Osrith continued to frown. Are you and Domhnall the hostages? As the realization of the gravity of her question worked into his mind, Domhnall's voice called, No, Osrith. Constantine, and we are merely spectators, witnesses to our aunt's marriage. Osrith turned her head slowly to her lord. It was the first time since finding her with Constantine that he had spoken to her directly. For once, Constantine sensed that she wanted to speak to his cousin and reined his horse on. Osrith slowed to a halt, as did Domhnall. My lord, Osrith began, bowing her head as she made to say her apologies. But Domhnall nodded forward. She turned her head. In the far distance, a green hill rose out of the landscape like the AC Kelpie, rippling the flat landscape around it. Teamrak, Domhnall pointed. Then, a rare smile curved his lips. We will rest there tonight. He reached over to Osrith's horse, taking the rein. I regret that I did not honor my vow, my lord, Osrith suddenly blurted out, unable to keep it to herself any longer. Domhnall stopped his horse and looked at her as she bowed her head. And ... I have no sword. The heir to the Pictish and Dulriadan thrones stared at her, then stroked the mane of her horse. You will have one again, I am sure, Mokroga, he replied, having declared her his warrior once more. Then, he gave her a smile. Grease or tooth oin, ain is Osrith, I do not want to be left with camp space downwind of the horses.